Welcome to the Atheist Podcast. I'm Erin.
And I'm Kelley. Atheist is where we will explore American cultural trends through the lenses of a devout theist
And a devout atheist. We will discuss the messiness of being human.
the latest in social science, psychology, and American culture.
And what any of it has to do with Homo sapiens' longtime preoccupation with religion.
Hey, Erin.
Hey, Kelley.
Happy New Year.
Hey, welcome to the new year.
And purpose and meaning in the new year.
So we are recapping our conversation with Dr. Professor Patrick Hill from Washington University in St. Louis, and our discussion on, finding meaning and purpose and how that helps people throughout the course of their lives, but especially in transition moments where, maybe meaning and purpose is not as clear, or
when we're moving from one purpose to another, or one kind of identity of self to another identity, right?
Yeah. At least that's one of the themes of our discussion. I mean, we talked about a lot of things, but that was definitely one of the themes of the discussion that Kelley and I have both come back to, is because I think we all see ourselves, especially in those spaces, is we've all experienced those transition moments that sort of make our identity vulnerable, where it's like, well, what does this mean for who I am, and where am I going, and all of those things that we all kind of experience in our lives.
Can I tell a funny story?
Sure, of course.
Something you just triggered in me, and so. Yeah, when our identity becomes vulnerable. I remember when I transitioned from being an actress in grad school to being a student, an education major, and getting my teaching certification, and I started working as a teacher. That was a huge identity transition moment for me. And I remember being I remember my the texture of my hair changed. It was so weird. It was I was I have to wear skirts now. I have to be a person that looks like a teacher. It was very weird. I felt literally this, I changed on a cellular level.
Yeah, because you probably did.
I probably did.
Because there is more going on in our unconscious minds than we realize, and it is 100% affecting us on a biological cellular level, like your hair, apparently.
Yes.
You see that too. I mean, I think for a lot of women, one of the clearest ways that we experience that shift, right, is when we
have children.
Yes.
And our hair definitely changes then.
Yes, it gets super thick and then it falls out, and it's there's so many things. The other thing that I've actually, I don't know if you've ever had this conversation or experience with anybody, but I've actually had a few conversations with women who struggled with depression or other mental health issues before they were pregnant, and then after it stopped.
Really? I've heard more of the opposite.
The other way. Right. Well, I think that tends to be maybe the more common, because of postpartum depression, that kind of thing.
While they're pregnant, they're depressed, or?
No, they were depressed before. And then had a baby, and then they're like, I don't know, something in my brain changed, and I'm not sad anymore.
Oh,
Isn't that crazy? It's something, it flipped a switch.
That's interesting. I have never heard that, but I believe it for sure. The other kind of universal experience that I have experienced, and I've heard from a lot of different friends, is when you're leading up to one of those threshold moments, like I'm about to get married, or I'm about to have a child, or I'm about to, I don't know, retire, or whatever those things are, all of a sudden, prior to leading up to those moments, people get really, really afraid of dying. I have to live until this moment happens. Have you ever heard of that or experienced that? Oh, I felt that big time. I was terrified of dying right before I got married. right before
What?
right before I got yes.
Really?
Yes. And I have
that's-
heard other people experience
That's
this.
so interesting.
Yeah. Like here's a big, like I have this huge expectation that's coming up in my future.
Yeah.
And God forbid I die. Like something's going to happen. Like I'm going to die right before this happens.
You know, what's interesting about maybe both of these things that we're talking about is that maybe like it's just because of for whatever reason it was brought up in conversation, and then you're like, oh, that's interesting, right? Like it just would have never occurred to me because I don't know, I've never had that phenomenon happen to me, so I've never asked anybody about it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But I've had a lot of I've had a couple people who are super close to me that had that experience of like having children, and then that happened, and so they had shared that with me. So then I was like, oh. That's really curious, and I started asking more people if that.
So is it like an 11:11 thing?
I don't know.
Like,
I guess
now I see 11:11 everywhere.
I've
heard of it, and so now I notice it.
We are pattern-seeking animals, and
Yes.
we're like, oh, is there a pattern here? I'm going to see if that's true, and then it's like I'm just going to find all of these things and verify my own experience, right?
Yes.
And that's how conspiracy theories are born.
Welcome to our podcast. Oh my gosh,
man.
meaning.
Yeah, we can ascribe meaning to all kinds of things. That is for sure. But I will say that what Patrick is talking about, that I think is super, super valuable for people.
Yes, very helpful.
All these moments, these transition moments. So a writer that I think is just very good at storytelling. So Simon Sinek is his name, and he is somebody who, maybe doesn't have the academic pedigree that you see for.
He certainly has the ideas that have.
Well, what I think he does better than most is
explain.
Yes. So what I would call him is he is somebody who I think is a generalist.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that, and I think that in sometimes we don't give enough credit to those people, but they're people who can see this big picture and say like
sevens do that.
How are all these things connected, right? And I can actually explain this in a story that people can connect to, and because I can explain it in a story that people can connect to, all of a sudden they can see something different in their lives, right? And so that's the thing that I think he does better than a lot of writers, is he's able to take a lot of psychology, research in biology, and neuroscience and present it in a way that is
intuition too, right?
Yeah.
That idea of like, I just kind of know this to be true.
And then he's like, I'm going to go research and see how this kind of bears out, right? So he his famous book is called Start With Why, and it is and he will say this is a book a theory not based in psychology but biology, because if you look at a cross section of the human brain, the limbic brain, the oldest part of the brain, the part of the brain that controls all decision making and doesn't have capacity for language, is driven by feeling. And that newer part of the brain, the neocortex, is how we rationalize all of the decisions that we make. Oh, well, I made this decision because of this or that or blah, blah, blah. But it's really your limbic brain that's sort of just controlling your decision making, and then you're explaining it with the new part of your mind. But what he tends to consult around businesses, but also has sort of expanded his scope to look at how just on a human being level, like an individual human being, how do we think about our own personal whys? Like, why do I exist? Why do I get out of bed every morning? What motivates me to be a person in the world?
Right.
And what he would say is that, like, if you can identify that, and we identify that through the stories that we tell about our lives, then we can take that idea, that meaning and purpose, that why, we can apply it in a bunch of different contexts. So I see myself as an educator. Okay, well, maybe I can take that same why and I can apply it in a different context. Like, I don't have to be a teacher to, express that why.
Right.
I could be something
a podcast host.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And and I loved that about what Patrick said in terms of helping people find meaning and purpose, that identifying that kind of core purpose, that core why, and that can lead them through those kind of transition moments. And I think he talked about his mom being a teacher, and then I forget what her job was that she kind of found after she retired, but yeah, I thought that was really helpful, and which led me to, or maybe my story led him to talk about his mom, but that idea that casting agent that a friend told me about, that once you realize why you're an actor, sometimes you don't need to be one anymore. Because being an actor is like basically what they tell you is, if you can be anything else, do it, because it kind of sucks, right?
Yeah.
Like you're
Yeah.
constantly like grinding and,
being rejected.
I mean,
and
it's
hustling for money and
hustling. It's just not a particularly great life.
yeah.
But people who do it because, they're driven, they're compelled to do it.
Yeah.
But if you can figure out, why this is
There's a lot.
important to you,
Yeah.
then there might be a way that you can fulfill that need in some other way. And I find that a really compelling idea. And in my life and in this place that I'm in right now, I'm definitely at one of these threshold moments where I'm getting ready to retire. And so I'm moving from this place of being, and actually, I feel like I have kind of moved away from being an actor. I don't even know if I've talked about being an actor on this podcast, but I'm an actor. And it was interesting. I kept saying for the longest time, like, this is my last show. This is the last show I'm doing. This is my last show. And then the thing that actually ended up, at least for now, being my last show was right before the pandemic. And we got all the way to the final dress rehearsal of this show. And then the pandemic exploded and we had to cancel. So my last show actually never happened, which is kind of poetic in a sense, but this idea that when we're moving from one thing to another, we don't need to find, I don't need to leave teaching or leave acting to just find another way of acting or another way of teaching. What is it that I loved about theater? What is it that I love about teaching? Well, really, what I find for me as my core why is I love working in community. I love collaboration. I love the spontaneity of being with other people and the pop of ideas that come when you're working with other people.
Yeah.
Well, I can find that in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
And so if you, listener, are in a place of transition, whether that's you just graduated from college or you're you're thinking the job that you're in right now is not the job that you want to stay in for a long time, or you're retiring, having that understanding of what it is you love about the job. And if you don't love the job you're in, that's something to be aware of too.
Yeah.
What is it that really drives you? What is it that you feel, in what situations do you feel the most generative and fulfilled? And what is it about those times that does that? And what other places might you be able to experience that? And it's actually probably a lot of different places.
Yeah.
You've just had a job change recently.
Yeah. I mean, I think when I think about my why, I don't know. I think historically, I would have always said it's actually, for me, it's mostly about helping. I get excited when I feel like other people, I'm helping other people kind of find their path, or elevating, helping cultivate another person into being becoming successul, right? Or finding their path. So obviously it makes sense why teaching was an appealing thing.
Yeah.
I feel like right now I've spent the last, I don't know, not quite a year, but we're getting there. trying to honestly learn as much as I can, which in and of itself is like an interesting.
That's also a why for you.
It is just like I am immersed in learning in a way that is fairly intense. So that has been, but what I have actually found is, and which I feel grateful for. So like the leadership of my company is definitely like part of the reason they hired me is like, yes, we like want your expertise and we want you to learn and be able to like fill these different roles. But what we really want is you to be a team leader, right? Is somebody who is sort of helping cultivate a team and growing a team. And so just in the last couple of months, we've had a couple of new hires. And that's been like the first time where I've felt like I've got an opportunity to sort of, hey, this person is really doing a good job, and just making sure that like people see that and making sure they feel good about what they're doing, and, trying to give feedback that's helpful, and advice, and so again, kind of back on that path of trying to help people see their value and the what they're giving back to the organization. So it's you can see that that why that deep meaning and purpose that we all sort of seek is it's transferable to different fields for sure. And I think you can find it in different ways throughout your life.
Yeah. And you know what? This brings me back to kind of something we talked about in the episodes with Oliver Berkman, where we talk about the idea of optimization versus like becoming, right? Like your deep why, I just don't think can be self-referential, right? It can't be about like, well, I want to be the best influencer ever. Like, I mean, it can be. I guess it can be, but like, I don't know how much meaning and purpose you're going to find in that. Yeah. Like, there needs to be, I think, something in, as you're looking for your why, as you're looking for your deep purpose and meaning, there has to be some kind of relationship with other, with something outside of yourself. I think
so. I would imagine that most people, that is what they're going to say, right?
Like
so at some level, personal achievement is only so much, right? Yeah. It's about the relationships that you have.
Yeah.
What's interesting, I think, in a job or professional context is that like sometimes, you're, and this is certainly the case in teaching, right? You're like helping cultivate, somebody who you're like, okay, bye-bye, like I'll never see you again. And there is an element to that, right? Like, but you still feel like, well, I helped that person on their path. So it's transitory, but also like in this new context that I'm in, it's also like, okay, this is someone I'm going to work with.
Yeah.
For a period of time. And so, it does shift the dynamic a little bit too, in that regard, in terms of like, I don't know. I don't know that it changes how I approach what I would do or how I would help someone on that path, but it is a different dynamic where in teaching, it's like you're just like, okay, bye. And you're moving on to a new phase of your life and so forth, where this is like, okay, you're being trained and now I'm going to know you for maybe a long time.
Yeah. Maybe a long time. Yeah. And I wonder, for you, cultivating long-term relationships in kind of a work setting, and mentoring people, what do you find to be the most helpful ways of kind of doing that, of kind of finding common purpose maybe within a work environment?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if I can answer that question exactly, but what I would say is like when people ask me what is the thing that I miss the most about teaching, and it is my friends.
Yeah.
It is my colleagues, actually, the people that I had the long-term relationships with.
Sure.
That and the ones that I have really strong relationships with, I still see like y'all.
Yeah.
And a few others that probably are listening to the show. So hey, what's going on?
Hey,
But
what's up?
but then there's also folks that you like maybe weren't super close with, but you enjoyed seeing, you enjoyed talking to, and you're just like, I don't really see that person anymore. And that it's just that phase of life. That you have those relationships that like, sometimes you look back and you're like, oh, if I had done my wedding 10 years apart, I would have had different people. I wouldn't have had because they were all just like my siblings, but which is why I was like, this is the right smart thing to do is like, my siblings will be here forever. And like the friends are, change sometimes over time, but the people that you would invite would just be different. Right. Because of the phase in life that you're in. But, so I think that matters. Those long-term relationships in your life certainly matter in terms of adding meaning and purpose, and maybe you find them in your working life, and maybe they jump out of your working life and they enter your personal life in some way, which is always nice. But I guess to the question of like, how do you, I don't know, coach or mentor, right? Yeah. You just at the end of the day, I will say like this is one thing that I thought has been interesting about my current work. So my current work dynamic, it's a hybrid work environment. So there's an office, and then there's also you work at home, and so there's variability around how much you're around other people. And so we use Slack, which is a pretty common platform that a lot of people use, and I don't know, the business world. I don't know how common it is across all businesses, but
it's pretty common.
It's pretty effective for us.
Yeah.
And the one thing that I really appreciate is like, I mean, I swear to God, there's probably not a day that goes by where there's not like just in the general channel, which is, hey, shout out to this person who kicked ass on this project, and like, I just want to recognize that this person did this and they added value to the team, the company, blah, 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 right? And so which we know is so from a serotonin, right? Like firing in your brain, like feeling a sense of pride in your accomplishments, being recognized in your tribe matters a lot. And I know I totally feel that, like whenever it's like, oh, I got a shout out in the channel because I did something great, I'm like, oh, I feel really good about that. And and we do this. We do like monthly get-togethers too that are in person, and then we recognize different things that people have done. We actually hand out $100 bills.
Wow!
So it's like, so whatever the theme is, right?
We don't do that at school.
No. Right?
Wish.
There's no $100 bills that are being handed out. So it's like they'll have like a stack of like $1,000.
Jeez.
And it's like $100 bills, and that'll be like a theme. Hey, this is a value of the company.
Oh.
Right? They'll do like a little spiel, the leaders of the company. Hey, this is a value of the company, and because we're here to reinforce the values of the company, I want to acknowledge this person who, whatever, did this thing in this way.
They're making those synapses.
100%.
They're
right?
firing those synapses.
Here's the $100. Now you, then the person who got the $100, you get to call out the next person and say how they lived up to this value and like pass it on, basically.
Wow.
So, and it is in the moment, spontaneous, and it's just like,
that's a lot of pressure.
It is. I remember the first time I was like, oh God, because I was like, if it comes to me, who am I going to give it to next? Right. And I was like, I had it all planned in my mind. And then the person before me that was called said the person that I was going to give it to next. I was like, shit.
Yeah, right.
So I had to think on the fly, and it worked out fine. But it was, it is a lot of pressure, because I feel like anytime you're like, oh God, I got to get up and talk in front of everybody.
I want to do that in my class.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's actually really, really cool.
Aww.
For sure. And especially when you're in a work environment where we all are a lot now, where you're maybe not in person all the time, because a lot of work can be done remotely or on your own. Making sure that whoever the leadership is has to be really intentional about like the values that they're setting and the motivation that they're how they're structuring like what the things that people should care about.
Right.
And so I will say, like, I really do think that the folks that run our company they're good about that.
Yeah, that's awesome. We're talking about, building community as a means of creating purpose and meaning. And I think probably for so many of us, that is such an important part of meaning. And it's something that's been so lost in the last few years with the pandemic and, working from home and different things. And I know for me, in terms of like thinking about retirement, that's my biggest fear, is like losing a sense of community. Even though I have, plenty of friends and stuff who I don't work with, just that sense of like, those kind of daily interactions, those are so important. And, I think we've talked about this on the podcast before, but Vivek Murthy and the idea of like loneliness and that, rip in the fabric of community that we're all experiencing, and how we kind of move through that and mend that.
I was thinking about this the other day, because I'm like, honestly, I suspect, and I don't know this for sure, but I would bet that I'm probably one of the more proactive people in this environment.
Well, I remember you being a very proactive person, when we worked together, and I named that actually. I will say that I named that actually in a meeting when I was like, we've lost a lot of our proactive community builders, because you are a proactive community builder, and that's not easy, because that takes a lot of vulnerability to step outside of yourself to say, I'm going to build community in this space.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah. I mean, it's true.
Well,
and it's a gift.
I honestly think that's why they hired me at this job, is for that reason, because I think they knew that, hey, we're in this new world that's changed since the pandemic. People don't want to come back into the office. How do we find people that like want, like, help people actually want to have a collaborative environment?
Yes.
And so, I've tried to really go out of my way of like trying to find opportunities to make personal connections with people, so that those day to day, like as you're doing work, I'm like, hey, I'm gonna just call you and be like, hey, what's going on, and and maybe that's not something that people are used to, because they're, I don't know, but I found that it just makes work more fun.
Yeah.
And it's more fun.
And who doesn't want work to be more fun?
I know, it's more fun. It's more interesting. You actually get better ideas because other people are smarter than you or know things that you don't know. And, that's how good work is done, which is why we're, we have similar personalities, but that we find that work is better when it is in a community of people.
We have a mutual friend who we worked with before named Nick. And I remember Nick always saying, like, I want to be next to the smartest person in the room. Like, I just want to be in connection. I want to be with people and in collaboration with people. Yeah.
That actually reminds me of another quote, which I actually like the Nick version of this better, but I think both are maybe true, which is, if you want to be rich, find the biggest pile of money and stand as close to it as possible. And maybe it's, if you want to be the smartest person in the room, if you want to be smart, find the smartest person in the room and stand as close as them as possible.
Yeah. And and the other thing I want to say is, one of the things that Patrick, I think, brought to the conversation was this idea of being able to be agile in times of crisis. And, we have talked about this kind of crisis of fragility, right? And that we have so many fragile people in the world, and And that's not saying anything political, because we're like talking about both sides of the political spectrum being, super fragile in terms of like, I am certain about what I believe and what I think, and my way is my way or the highway, and that kind of certainty makes you pretty brittle.
Yeah, it does.
And I think what Patrick kind of talked about was, in times of crisis or transition or threshold, or, in these moments that we all go through, this ability to be able to move and be agile is kind of an antidote to being fragile, and to be able and to be, susceptible to breaking.
It's anti-fragility, right?
Yeah.
Which is the that idea that you actually, which is how biology works, but it's that you become stronger through difficult stress, right?
Suffering.
Just through suffering, right? Like your immune system, your muscles, your cognition, everything has the potential to become stronger with tension and difficulty, and having to have some level of resilience to sort of like make it onto the other side. And that is it is a difficult, I think we're in a culture right now where it's like, oh, well, if it's like uncomfortable, that is not okay. And it's like, that's actually how you develop
That's
resilience.
how you know you're on the path.
Right.
So I've been sending you my little Roar quotes.
Yeah.
My little Roar little mini audio things. So Bill and I are doing a class right now on his book, Falling Upward. And they've been working on creating this curriculum for this class over the last few years, and it's really, really good. And basically, the premise of the book and the premise of the class is that the hero's journey is myth and true for a reason. It's true, and it's what we all kind of aspire to kind of go through to kind of reach this, new place, to go through these threshold moments. And so we're only a couple lessons in, so I'll kind of come back to it. But this was something really interesting, and because he talks about Odysseus, and he also talks about Divine Comedy, and he talks about how Dante, as he goes through, as he goes on this journey, he journeys with Virgil, and he journeys into Hades, right? And he kind of spirals down to hell, and then he goes up through purgatory, and that we can only kind of go so far with this idea of reason, and then we need to, as we kind of break through to this new ground, we kind of have to go to we move to paradise, not with rationality and reason, but with myth and this idea of higher purpose and higher meaning.
Yeah.
And we have to actually go to the feminine. We have to go to Beatrice. We leave Virgil behind, and we go to Beatrice to move into this realm of heaven. And so I'll kind of come back to it when we get further into it.
Well, that story you just told, it flips what we were talking about at the very beginning, right? Like the Simon Sinek, the start with why philosophy on its head, right? You're starting with that outer layer to sort of get to the inner layer, the thing that we don't have the right words to sort of articulate, but we know very powerfully to be, I don't know.
Yeah, we have to go to that place of lack. We have to go to that place of absence in order to find the thing that is our why. Sometimes. Yeah.
I like that. I'm gonna think about that.
You're gonna go back and read the Divine Comedy.
Yeah. It's always a good idea.
It's always a good idea.
If you're looking for a way to spend your Friday night.
Divine Comedy. Delve into the depths of Hades with us. So So thanks, Erin.
Thanks, Kelley. It's always good.
Always good.
So I guess this new year,
Yeah.
keep looking for meaning
And connection. As always, thank you to our audience for investing your time and listening to us. Please subscribe, leave some feedback, and rate our podcast. Most importantly, share it with a friend. Our show will only grow because of you. If you have any show suggestions, questions, or thoughts on the show, feel free to write us at atheist@stlpodcast.com.
Atheist is produced by Justin Seiwell and Trend Media STL. You can follow us and other great podcasts on Instagram at STL Podcasts. Thank you for listening, and keep looking for connection.